Hello and welcome to Chessington World of Adventures as we take on a two-part series now about the park, about how the park's developed, about the inception of the park and its future. Now I must stress from the start, this is our opinion of the park. We've been visiting the park since 1990 and this isn't going to be an opinion shared by everyone, that's for a dead cert. Now then, we are going to look at Chessington for a couple of reasons. One, the park is a theme park. You see in the background, you can see Dragon's Fury there, and you can see the park has lots of themed areas. It's not an amusement park, it doesn't have rides just plonked here, there and everywhere. They are themed rides. Whatever you may think of them over the last couple of years, we will go through, but they are themed rides. The park is on a high. Its attendance is up for the 6th year running. The park is doing really, really well. However, the negativity that still goes with this park, particularly from enthusiasts and kind of people that are still living in the 90s, is at its peak. So we're going to try and understand why. We're going to have a look at a couple of different things over a two-part series. We'll be filming some of the rides as well as we go around to mix it in, and we'll be giving our opinions as we go. Now then, on this episode we're going to be looking at the start of Chessington World of Adventures. Now, Chessington used to be a zoo, so we're going to have a look at what brought it all to being a theme park. The early boom of the theme park. Now, the theme park had some real boom years. The sudden change of direction the park had to take, and kind of it getting left behind just before that in the mid-2000s. Now, Chessington was a world famous zoo. However, back in the 80s, the early 80s, attendance figures were low and the owners were looking at moving to a completely new direction. The park, with a range of animals, we mean a really good range of animals, animals that now would be an envy of most zoos. Polar bears, giraffes, elephants, they had lions, tigers and everything else was all here, present and correct. Some just where we are now. The hippos used to sit just over there where Dragon's Fury's drop was. So that's how far they came up the park. There is no doubt that the park was dated though. The zoo as it was dated, the kind of enclosures were dated, and it was not a very fresh looking park, so attendance was on the low. The park did have a couple of fairground rides, and we do mean a couple. They used to have a dinosaur park up the top end with a few dinosaur slides and bits. They used to have a little train that went round. They also used to have a carousel, a little Ferris wheel. If you head onto our website, you can see some of the rides they used to have before they became a theme park. But new technology was coming in around the world, with places in America opening looping roller coasters, massive thrill rides and everything like that. It was time for someone in the UK to take the change, and that someone was going to be Chessington Zoo. So 1987 come round, that's when the park opened, but before then the legend that is John Wardley came up with a concept to make Chessington a theme park, and not an amusement park, just kind of full of rides. It is very essential that you understand it's a theme park. It's rides that aren't necessarily the most thrilling, based on themes, and he did an amazing job. So the concept was to make it like Disney. Now, we know we don't like comparing Merlin, Chessington or anything like that to Disney, but that's exactly, they were the benchmark of how to set up a theme park. And without a doubt, people may disagree, Chessington World of Adventures was the first theme park in the UK. Now, the reason we say Chessington was the very first theme park, because you may be thinking, oh, Alton Towers and places like that. Now, Alton Towers at the time was not a theme park, it was an amusement park. It had lots of temporary rides, it had lots of attractions that were kind of in and out, fairground rides and other, rides that really wouldn't be classed as themed. Now, they did have some themed rides, the sort of, Doom and Sons and rides like that had a kind of theme behind them. But in terms of themed areas and everything like that, Alton Towers wasn't there. Chessington was, without a doubt, the first theme park in the UK, and it opened in 1987. It's 30 years old this year, Chessington, which is another reason why we want to do this feature. We've been visiting the park, as we said, since 1990, and we visit this park in its current state now approximately 20 to 25 times a year. If you include out of season, probably 30 times a year as well, to include the zoo. Now, the reason we do this is we always have a fantastic day at the park. When the park opened back in 1987, it had real themed areas. They included the Mystic East, they included Calamity Canyon, and they included the Market Square, along with Dragon River, which is now Dragon Falls, which is going to be Tiger Rock, the Runaway Mine Train, which is now Scorpion Express, and the Fifth Dimension, which is Tomb Blaster. So this is Chessington World of Adventures in 2017, and if you haven't visited the park in recent years, I do suggest you do. For the simple reason is it's not as bad as what everyone makes out. Why people make it out to be bad, I don't know. So let's look at the areas and let's have a look at the rides and see what's actually original from 1987. We have Wild Asia. Wild Asia opened in 2010 along with Cobra, the Jungle Bus, which was left over from Beano Land, as well as the Monkey Swing at Tuk Tuk Terminal and the Temple of Mayhem. None of those attractions were here when the park opened in 1987. Land of the Dragons opened in 2004. All these rides arrived in 2004 and indeed are still in the park now. They include Dragon's Fury, which you've seen in the background, Canopy Capers, which is a little play area, Griffin's Galleon, Dragon's Playhouse, as suggested a playhouse, and Sea Dragons. Now then, we have the Wild Woods, formerly Transylvania. This upset a lot of people when Transylvania was renamed to Wild Woods. However, that opened in 1990s, also not an original part of the park. That includes a Gruffalo ride for this year, which is new, and it also includes a Vampire. Now, the Vampire has undergone several changes since opening in 1990, so it's definitely not an original ride. Probably the worst area of the park, without a doubt, is Africa, mainly because it shows no resemblance whatsoever to Africa. That includes the Treetop Hoppers, which arrived in 2002, and Toadie's Crazy Cars, formerly Old Crocs Railway. So part of that ride has been here since 1987, however, not at all in its current state. Down in Pirates Cove, we have the Black Buccaneer, which opened in 1988. It's possibly one of the oldest operating rides in the park, and Sea Storm, which opened in 1995. Now over to the Mystic East. The Mystic East is now closed. This is quite late on in 2017. Peking Heights has been removed and Dragon Falls is going to be rethemed. But Mystic East is home to Dragon Falls. Now Dragon Falls at the time, in September, was the oldest operating ride in the park in terms of it hasn't been changed at all. Yeah, they renamed it from Dragon River, they took down a bit of rock work, but in terms of kind of structure, theme and everything like that, everything was exactly the same. That, however, is going to change for next year. And it also had Peking Heights, which sadly has gone. Forbidden Kingdom opened in 1994 with Tomb Blaster. Say Terror Tomb in 1994, which is now Tomb Blaster, and also Ramesses Revenge, which joined the area in 1995. Mexicana has Scorpion Express. Now again, the Runaway Mine Train was here in 1987, however Scorpion Express is a complete revamp of that ride, completely different, unrecognisable, except that obviously the track. That has been rethemed recently, and that was joined by Rattlesnake in 1998. Now Adventure Point is another new area for this year, and it saw the end of Market Square, which was an original area from 1987. That has the park's new carousel in, Hocus Pocus Hall, Tiny Truckers, none of which were part of the original park lineup. And then you have Safari. So Safari is a relatively new area. It includes Safari Ride into Africa, which was only put in 2013, and it includes the Fine Jumbos, which has actually been kicking around since near enough when the park opened. Again, it's been rethemed, it's been moved several times. So when you look at it, 1987 rides really aren't here anymore. And, you know, people go on about how the park are kind of holding on to the old attractions and holding on to nostalgia. They're really not. They're really trying to move forward. The problem is that enthusiasts and people that visited the park in 1990 aren't moving forward with it. We have amazing days out here, and it's very important that we stress we have amazing days out here. We go to many theme parks. We don't just come to Chessington. We're not restricted to just come to Chessington. We can go anywhere over the country to theme parks, but we always have a great day here, and I don't think that's going to change. So we are standing in what was Circus World. Circus World used to be right here, big circus tent over the back, the juggler, the flying jumbos, all there, brightly coloured, and it was part of the original opening of the park. Now, the park had a massive boom from the word go right the way up to the late 90s. The park was in constant growth. So, 1990 saw the Vampire. The Vampire being the UK's only suspended roller coaster and the world's only one to go above the trees and dip down below underground level. That was a massive, cannot understate massive for the UK, not just Chessington, for the UK. That was accompanied by Professor Burt Bubbleworks, which also opened in the same year. We've just come off the back of Smuggler's Gallon in 1998. There was a couple of year break, but 1994 saw the replacement of the Fifth Dimension into Terror Tomb. Ramesses Revenge a year later. Rodeo was really highlighted just after there. It used to be the juggler that used to just sit over there. Rodeo was moved down to Mexicana, where the flying jumbos are. That was made a massive statement of as a massive thrill ride. 1998 continued the growth in the park with the first new roller coaster since the Vampire and the Rattlesnake opening in Mexicana in 1998. The Rattlesnake replaced the Reptile House, which moved down to Creepy Cave. So some of the animal enclosures were kept over this time, but some of them were removed. Giraffes were removed and the elephants removed, hippos removed. Everything was sort of taken out of the park in favour of the rides. 1999 saw Samurai come to the park, and that was kind of the turning point. Samurai was a massive thrill ride, huge thrill ride, and the top scan to this day is still a massive thrill ride. But once Samurai kind of got into the park, that was when the boom started to end. Now the year 2000 did see Beano Land replace Circus World, so 1999 there was nothing here. Circus World shut the year before, it was kind of completely empty here, grassed off if you will, ready for Beano Land to open. Beano Land brought 3 new rides as well, and a couple more rides have kind of been added as it's developed over Beano Land and Wild Asia in 2010. But year 2000 for Beano Land was kind of the park's best year. Arguably they had a brand new area, they had new rides, they had thrill rides in Ramesses Revenge, Rodeo, Vampire, Samurai. They were all kind of massive rides and the park was on a high. Now then, they can't just cope on that. They don't have the space like Alton Towers had. So whilst Alton Towers at this time had opened Nemesis and they'd opened Oblivion, kind of these were massive roller coasters, they didn't have that here. You know, Vampire was a huge roller coaster. In the year 2000, the park was on a high and it had a new cult following. The rides like Terror Tomb and Professor Burt's Bubble Works and even Samurai, which was fairly recent, along with Ramesses Revenge, Dragon Falls, which is over there, and Beano Land, which had just opened. These were cult rides. You know, people wanted these rides to stay, people wanted these rides to be maintained. However, they were always looking for the next thrill. Now, Beano Land was slightly different because the park had gone very much down the thrill ride route over its boom. But Beano Land was quite the opposite. Beano Land was very much a family area. Maybe apart from the chair swings aside, which carry a 1.2 height restriction, it was very a family orientated ride. Now then, they had family rides. Let's not forget, they already had a carousel. They had Sea Storm, they had Safari Skyway, they had a clown coaster, they had the Old Crocs Railway. So family rides weren't really a problem for Chessington. They wanted the big thrill rides. They wanted the park to be the southern version of Alton Towers. So the next big plan was the next big roller coaster for Chessington World of Adventures, and this is what changed the park, and it changed the park probably not for the good for a good 10 years. Now, Colossus at Thorpe Park was planned to come to Chessington World of Adventures. So Colossus was meant to come here, however, due to planning permissions and the noise that the Vampire made, getting Colossus to a park like this suddenly wasn't possible, and the whole direction of the park had to change. Now the problem the park had is whilst 2000 was an absolute high, some of the rides they had which were kind of touted as thrill rides were no longer thrill rides. The reason for this was the fact that the youth had developed, the adults had developed, and kind of TV had developed, and everything around everyone had developed. So the case of something like Terror Tomb, which was more aimed at the kind of the teenage market in terms of being scary and everything, was no longer scary at 10 years old. It was maybe scary at 5 or 6 years old. So it brought the age right down. Rides kind of like the Vampire, you know, when you had Nemesis and you had Oblivion in the country, Vampire all of a sudden looked a little tame, and people that maybe were a bit scared to ride it at 10 were no longer scared to ride it now. So even rides like the Runaway Train, which had been a staple for Chessington, were no longer classed as a thrill ride. Back in 1987, believe it or not, getting on the Runaway Train was a real thrilling experience, where kind of late 90s it really wasn't. So they had a bit of a problem at the end of the year 2000. Vampire wasn't as reliable as it should have been. Some of the rides were starting to show their age, and the realisation that a big thrill ride was not going to be coming to the park anytime soon had to mean a change of direction in the park. The realisation that they couldn't get a big thrill ride into the park meant they had to change direction, and they have to shift focus. So end of 2000, Vampire closes for refurbishment, leaves the park a little bit stuck for 2001. Now, the park had built up a huge reputation over the years, which was to carry them for the next few years going. They had to shift focus, and shift focus they did. 2002 saw the Vampire reopen as a flawless family family coaster with Tomb Blaster, which was an interactive version of Terra Tomb, much brighter, much more kind of engaging to the younger public, if you will. It also showed a route the park had to take. Now, sadly, I'm not sure the owners or the park knew which route they had to take, but the remainder of the noughties kind of got lost, really got lost for Chessington. There's not a lot to talk about. I really don't think they kind of knew which way to go. I believe the park felt that they could get a big thrill ride in, they continue building as a big thrill park and not have to deal with this. But age caught up with them, what they could do caught up with them, and the park and the company really weren't sure what to do with Chessington. So, Chessington was established. It was living off a massive reputation of the 90s, built by mass expansion and amazing theme. In an age of, you know, kind of less investment and kind of access to reviews. You know, people weren't reviewing the park, you couldn't see it. They could survive probably up to about 2008, and 2008 is when people started seeing the damage to the park. Now, in that time, we did get Land of the Dragons and Dragon Fury, which we saw earlier. That was new in 2004, and it's still one of their biggest rides now. But due to kind of either poor upkeep or you know, the focus shifting, things were being removed, things were changing, and you know, the park wasn't as it seemed anymore. So as we said, up to about 2008, the park got away with probably more than what they should have based on their reputation. You know, during this time, Samurai was removed from the park and sent to Thorpe Park. Rodeo was removed from the park. These were both 1.4 thrill machines. In addition to Professor Bert's Bubble Works, which was kind of falling apart, needed a refurbishment as well. That was brought in with Imperial Leather to just become Bubble Works. You know, the essence of the park was being ripped out as the park kind of decided which route they wanted to take. The Vampire refurb removed quite a lot of theming from the ride, including the rock tunnel and lots of bits in the station as well. And it was definitely showing its age. 2008, when the Sea Life opened, the park was showing its age. A lot of rides had gone, a lot of rides have been brought in that weren't kind of up to the standard. And you know, it really was falling behind. You had Alton Towers, which was opening kind of air, it was opening 13, it was opening real revolutionary rides. And of course, Thorpe Park's growth, which was absolutely huge from when Chessington started to go down. Bearing in mind it's the same company, you kind of understand that the money went into Thorpe Park, but maybe Chessington got forgotten about a little bit too much. Legoland also opened and was starting to thrive during this time. It kind of opened in 1996, so that kind of started thriving as well in the noughties as people want to go to Lego, and Lego naturally brings a really easy theme for the park with bricks and models and bits and pieces like that. So the time for change was what's needed at Chessington, and it didn't really come soon enough. But is it coming now? So that's what we're going to look at in the next episode, and it bugs me to this day, the amazing days we have at Chessington World of Adventures, what people say about the park and what people think about the park. And there's a lot of people that don't visit the park anymore. It was low in 2008, however the direction was continuing to change as the parks kind of went back to basics, which we'll look at in the next episode, and it started with this area right here. Thank you for joining us. Please check out the next episode.